So thank you, Kevin, and thank you to everyone for being here today to listen to my talk. My name is Henny, Head of Telecoms at UK Space Agency. I've been in post for about 6 years, and over that time, my team and I have sponsored multiple different satellite operators, satellite payload and platform developments. But one area that we've always missed in our perspective is the ground segment. So I'm really pleased to be able to talk today at this first ground segment conference. I think it's an excellent development and an excellent indication of the growing priority of ground segment within the space community. I'm going to start by talking about the UK Space Agency and what our current priorities are in the next year or two. And then I'll talk a little bit about what I do at the UK Space Agency and the perspective we have within my team on the market and the current disruption within that market and what it means for the sector. And then I'll talk a little bit more detail about what we're doing on ground segment and some of the opportunities that we have coming up as well. So UK Space Agency priorities, we have 4 key priorities at present. These are data for citizens. So there's a growing awareness of the benefits and importance of downstream applications, and a growing awareness that those applications are essentially data services. And within that, satellite communication is the trunking that transports that data. I'll talk a bit more about some of the new infrastructures that are going to be developed on satellite communication systems and what that means for this community, but also what it means for new markets like the autonomous vehicle market, the maritime market, and some of those other end-to-end infrastructures too. Economic growth isn't a surprise. So we've been developing the space economy at the UK Space Agency for the last 10 years. And we're very pleased to still be able to say that we return almost 10 to 1 for every pound invested in the UK sector for an economy worth 490 billion by 2030. And I hope what you'll see with the rest of my presentation is the importance of some of the new infrastructures that are going to contribute to that growth, and also the importance of having a flexible and dynamic ground segment that can deliver that. The other part of what we do is partnering on new missions and services with our international partners. So very pleased to be joined here by our ESA partners, who are a really important contributor to the UK growth, but also partnering on missions with other partners in the US and Canada and beyond. And then the final part is threat protection. So as space has become part of our critical national infrastructure, we at the UK Space Agency have developed the NSPOC. We've also developing our sustainability approach. And within the satellite communication sector, what we're looking at now is whether is what resilience and assurance means for that critical national infrastructure too. So some of the other things that we do. So the NSPOC is the National Space Operations Centre, and that tracks harmful space objects. We're also a leading contributor to the European Space Agency Vigil mission, looking at solar storms. We continue to invest in innovation in satellite communication, particularly around sustainability and active debris removal. I was very pleased recently to support the final phase of Astroscale's debris removal program, again partnering with the European Space Agency, that's really setting the standard for an entire new market. Parts of the agency also work with the UN and other standards bodies to promote peaceful, safe and sustainable use of space. I think we're joined by GSMA today as well. And what we're seeing is increasingly important contributions both to and from non-traditional standards bodies. So as we see convergence in the telecommunications market, we're increasing our contribution to global standards as well. And as part of that, we publish a regulatory roadmap of future regulation to ensure that we don't inhibit the market and that it's appropriate too. So looking more closely at satellite communications, my team is split into 4 main groups. And you won't be surprised to know that the first and perhaps most important element of our work at the moment is convergence for terrestrial and non-terrestrial systems. When I joined the agency 6 years ago, satellite communication was largely single geo satellites owned and operated by satellite operators, and there was very little discussion about changing that role and changing that dynamic. And I think it's been quite amazing to see the change over the last 6 years, where satellite communication is no longer single systems, but also it's no longer satellite space systems either. There's a real awareness that if the satellite communication sector is to thrive, it needs to be part of a much bigger pool. So it's not just the biggest fish in a very small pool anymore. There's an enormous market for telecommunications, and it's really good to see the Satcom sector reach out and embrace that market as well. The other part of what we do, of course, is constellations. So as part of that move away from single satellites, supporting new constellations is really critical. And I'm really pleased to have been able to support new constellation operators over the last 5 years. We have companies like Open Cosmos, In Space Missions, now part of BAE, who are developing new approaches to constellations as well. So they're not developing the sort of mega constellations, but they are developing new constellations with new purpose for new kinds of customers as well. And that's a really critical part of what the constellation market is delivering. And then the last sort of domain area that we have is adjacent markets. And I'm joined here by my colleague Josh, who leads on that. So if you're particularly interested there, do get in touch. Adjacent markets are all those markets where satellite communication is venturing very far out of its traditional scope. So when we talk about adjacent markets, we're talking about the services that operators need in debris removal, IOSM, and other systems, but also some of those far-reaching services that we're going to start seeing as well. So especially lunar communications, which promises to create an entirely new physical jurisdiction for everyone on Earth to live and work and travel in. Obviously, that's quite far off in the future. And then the last part, which I've included here, is around engagement as well. And we take engagement very seriously because there's so much disruption, and I'll talk about the disruption in a moment, but there's so much disruption. It's easy for us to engage with industry once or twice a year and say, well, that's it. You know, we understand what the next 12 months will be. But at the moment, the market is moving so quickly that we have a lot of touch points across the year. We work really closely with companies who are looking for assistance to manage that rapid change and to navigate their way through that rapid change, but also to be a responsive partner to those industrial partners too. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we see the market changing, and then I'll talk some more about the opportunities that we have coming up. So looking back, we can see that we've come through 10 years of quite a disruptive environment. We know that there's current disruption happening, and we know really that there's no calm waters at the end of it. There's even more disruption coming. So So looking back, we had single systems, we had tentative constellations starting, we had accelerated replaceability, and I think that was part of the key change. The satellite communication industry saw how telecoms was able to apply technological change much more rapidly, and so we've had these tentative steps, and that's increased with accessibility, both through new launch capability, but also with new orbits. So not having to have a 25-year order book, not having to have a 25-year space-hardened craft, and increasingly high volume. And I included the word decline of GEO, and I know some people will find that difficult, but we are seeing a decline in traditional markets, and they will change. It's not the end of GEO, and actually we're starting to see new multi-orbit transport layers, particularly from the SDA in defence, that are going to change the role of GEO and increase opportunities in LEO to be able to use that trunking. So at the moment, we are in a period of disruption. So we have multiple systems, we have accelerated convergence, an accelerated technology change happening right now. And what I've always found with the satellite communication industry is that they take entirely for granted consumer demand. And what we're seeing now is a rapid change in not just in consumer demand, but in how consumers view satellite technology and how they apply it in their own lives as well. So a key metric of that is that the iPhone 14, I think it had about 15 or 20% of the market share last year. Every single iPhone 14 enabled one new SATCOM customer. So last year there were tens of millions of SATCOM customers overnight. And they're a different kind of customer, and they use very different amounts of data, and many of them will never use SATCOM at all. But they are SATCOM customers, and they are changing what it means to use satellite communication. And then as part of that, we're also seeing market consolidation and a changing role for SATCOM. So again, looking back at Sorry, I've lost my thread. I've just seen the time. So the changing role for SATCOM is the idea that actually SATCOM is a very small part of a much bigger network of telecommunications networks. And then the future is that network of networks. It is, for the first time, we can genuinely say we should expect ubiquitous connectivity within 10 years, where everyone is connected with voice, text, and data on planet Earth. And that will allow new end-to-end infrastructures, and we'll see some really interesting technologies that are really going to impact this community as well. And that includes the transition to full optical. That includes the move from RF technologies as standard to optical technologies. And for consumers, they will still have RF terminals. And I don't see that changing for a very long time, but the growth of consumers will mean that every piece of spectrum that they use will be that much more valuable. And when you have optical as an option, it means what we'll see is a really rapid change very, very soon. So thinking about the disruption and sort of mapping our strategy against it, we've got those integrated networks, and we've got accelerating standardization and interoperability, and that's really key to the changes that are happening. We've also got, in 10 years' time, fully converged systems. We've got global operators who are going to be very different to the kinds of customers looking for ground services today. And they're going to have new system architectures, and that's a really key part of this for us, is understanding that these new system architectures are going to have new technologies. And when I gave this presentation before, someone came up to me afterwards and said, that's not true. The physics of optical means that it will never take off. And I had to say to them, well, actually, you will reorganize how optical technology is applied. So it won't look like it looks now. There will be a different way of doing things to allow that. And so what we're trying to do as the UK Space Agency is be alive to that change and to support you in industry in delivering that change as well. And all of this creates hugely complex networks that are essentially beyond human comprehension. And at this point, I should use the word AI, but I didn't put it in because it says hares racing. But absolutely, AI is essential to enabling this coming change. So it's not that Satcom will offer some amorphous AI service. It's absolutely a customer for that capability. And really what we're looking at is the next part of the information age. And that sounds very grand, but what we're looking at really is every person and every machine connected on Earth. So I'll be very quick because I've just spotted the time again. So the big change is direct to device. And this will be, within 5 years, most people on the planet will have devices capable of voice and text. By the end of 10 years, we expect that to include data as well. That means in 5 years' time, there'll be hundreds of millions more Satcom customers. In 10 years' time, there'll be billions of Satcom customers, and there'll be hundreds of billions of IoT Satcom customers as we all start to connect in entirely new ways. That'll open up opportunities for other end-to-end infrastructures, and I'll talk about what some of those mean. But for government, it means a change in how we manage mobility, borders, security encryption, and essentially service delivery. And that will transform human habitation on the planet. As a space agency, we often talk about the lunar environment, Mars and beyond. Actually, Satcom is going to change how people can live on planet Earth by opening up new places, by creating new connected places that can exist in harsher environments. And ultimately, the harshest of environments, which are off-world, and by supporting the development of the first communication and navigation program, what we're looking to do is essentially kickstart a lunar economy. And the response to that has been incredible. We have companies, at one point we had a company every week coming to us with their idea for what they could do on the lunar surface using this technology. I don't think all of them are runners, to be honest. But what we look to do is create the first off-world operators, and that's a huge jump in creating a new jurisdiction for commerce, for trade, but also for people to live and exist in as well. So perhaps a little carried away, full convergence means everyone everywhere connected. Some of these end-to-end infrastructures will be around autonomous vehicles, which are entirely new markets for us, but also old markets like aero connectivity will change, and it will change how we travel. Maritime will change, tracking and connectivity will change how people live and work on the world's oceans. And defense is a large box in itself. On service infrastructure, I've talked a little bit about those ones, but there's a question mark, and I think the question mark is really important. And it's not just where I ran out of ideas. It's actually, in 10 years' time, we don't know what the market will offer. And it's really important. 5 years ago, we didn't really expect lunar to be on there. We didn't expect maritime tracking to be a telecoms issue. So it's really important that we stay open to understanding what that spare box is. And I bet in 5 years' time, that list will look very, very different, and there'll be lots of boxes that should have been empty. So just aware of time, we have lots of programs available at the UK Space Agency to support the ground segment. In my team, we have the ESA ARTES program, and we're joined by a member of the ESA team on ARTES today. This is traditionally between 60 and 80 million pounds a year available to UK companies. And I'm really pleased to see different companies today who've taken up that offer of funding to develop the ground segment, to develop really innovative approaches to how ground segment is delivered. And the real value of ARTES is it's not just a technology innovation. It's also about the service layer that sits on top of it, that delivers it, and essentially gets it to market as well. We've also run the C-LEO program, which has been a £160 million commitment to develop the next generation of operators in the UK using advanced payloads. That first competition, we're still working through an extremely high volume of applications. The response has been phenomenal. And then I'm really pleased to say we've also got a procurement pilot. And I can't say too much about this because the announcement is for next month. But we hope to be able to announce a company that's been awarded a contract to deliver ground segment services to us that we in turn are using to support an international partnership. And that's not R&D money, that is government procurement. And it's a pilot, and we hope to roll it out even further as well. And then we have other programs as well, which I will rattle through. There's a big red sign saying my time's up. So I'll happily share this slide, and it's got all of the different programs that we can access. I know a lot of the programs have had applications from companies in this room, companies interested in ground segment. And I would say it's really important to see yourselves as eligible for this funding. When we talk about space and when you see that we fund things in the space segment, it's often easy to feel that we're not actually paying much attention. But I can assure you, we're waiting for the applications. And then importantly, I have very little time to talk about the ground segment, but if I've got a couple of minutes, I will talk about that very quickly. So just find my notes, sorry. So this is changing recognition, like I said, in the system architectures, where I put that picture in. The view of ground segment as something nice that happens somewhere in the distant background is changing. And actually all of the new system architectures require a different approach to not just the infrastructure that sits around ground segment, but also traditional conundrums over buy or procure. I know defence colleagues would probably say that they like to buy things. I always say that we should procure things. And I think what's interesting for the ground segment is it sits somewhere in the middle. You can have an assured ground segment in country, and it doesn't necessarily need to be owned, but it can be assured. And that can deliver the commercial services that governments procure. So really, this community is able to set a slightly different argument between the black and white procure or own conundrum. And that's creating opportunities, really. So the other part of that is ground segment for some of the new LEO constellations and some of the optical networks emerging will mean that we can put data wherever we want on planet Earth. And that hasn't happened. And so when I talk about reorganization, it's not just how do we get the data as quickly as possible from one customer to another, but how do we relay it through an assured ground segment to deliver that customer's demands, because increasingly the customers are asking for location services too. So we're also looking to support industry in responding to challenges, and that means supporting industry with the technology changes happening and also the organizational change. We're investing heavily in future 6G technologies in space. But again, we don't want to limit it to the space segment. This is a little bit like what happened with user terminals, where constellations emerged which didn't have user terminals that people could use. So what we don't want to see is investments in constellations happening that aren't able to deliver services and integrate with terrestrial comms as well. And we're also trying to help companies, like I said at the beginning, navigate their way through the rapid change that's taking place. We're helping companies to understand the regulatory changes that are accompanying that rapid change. And we're also trying to help our regulatory colleagues understand that as well. So again, if you are interested in regulation, if you're concerned about regulation, then please do come and talk to us. I found out recently that there was a notion that you couldn't have two ground systems 100 kilometers within 100 kilometers of each other. And when I asked Ofcom about it, they said that it was actually just an industrial practice. And it had become so deep-rooted that it was taken as given that Ofcom had this system. But they said there's no such system in place, and they're happy to tell you that too. And then very quickly, I just wanted to highlight two really important opportunities, well, three important opportunities. So the first one is, it's not this one. The first one is the NSPOC, the National Space Operations Centre. We are currently developing that, and there will be opportunities that we release on the government procurement portal. So please do have a look at the portal, consider joining it. There's a special space portal now where you can, where when you join the portal, you basically sign all the terms and conditions, and that means that the procurement is really rapid. And we've seen that recently with a company who was under contract within a couple of months, which never used to happen under the old procurement rules. So keep an eye on that. But we've also got two major opportunities, both of them through our colleagues at ESA. In Earth observation, we've got the TRUTHS mission, which is the traceable radiometry underpinning terrestrial and helio studies mission. And essentially that is a climate measurement tool. But what began our journey in the agency was talking to colleagues who work in Earth observation, where we are often siloed from each other in these sort of space domains. And we realized that here was a mission that had its own ground segment requirements. And those requirements are different to this mission. But essentially what we're looking at is developing a ground segment capability. And what we realize is that there isn't so much difference other than the antennas in the infrastructure. And so we could, without even saving money and reducing costs, we could invest the money in these missions in the ground segment to actively contribute to developing our capability. So on Truths, my colleague Will is in the audience. There is an ITT on delivering the ground segment for this mission. And I would urge you to have a look at it. On satellite communication, again, this is the Moonlight mission, which I mentioned earlier. This is to develop a commercial deep space ground segment sector and to create the world's first off-world operator. We're talking with ESA about how we use missions like this to increase the footprint for these deep space missions. So traditionally, they go to a very small number of companies. There's a very small space footprint. By opening up the ground segment and kickstarting a market in some of these areas, we're able to massively increase the amount of people directly benefiting from these big space missions, and we'll keep doing that. In this one, there isn't an ITT yet. It turns out it's really hard to do this, and we're working through it. But we're talking to ground segment operators at the moment. And if you are interested, do come and talk to us. We'll happily tell you where we are. And hopefully, well, not hopefully, we will have an ITT out in the next 6 to 12 months delivering that as well. So I am greatly over time, which I apologize. But thank you very much. If there's anything you'd like to talk to me about, do get in touch.